Welcome to Power BI Junkie.
Obviously, we promoted the headers and they changed the type real quick. We're just going to reference this. Actually, let's duplicate it. And then we want to do two things here. We want to go find the non-deployables column, and we're going to make sure that this doesn't have any spaces or special characters in the name. Otherwise, later on when you go to recognize this column in your M code, it will not recognize it. So ND codes, we're going to change that to that. And then what we're going to do is get rid of the null values, also remove empty. Reference this. Insert step after. And we want just the ND codes column. So we're just going to put that. And then at this point, we're going to put list.transform. We're going to transform this list. We're going to say each text.split. And we're going to split it as instead of comma, let's use the semicolons that are in there. All right, so let's make sure this just identify that we're splitting it by the delimiter, which is the semicolons, and then we're going to just go ahead and close this out real quick. Okay, there we go. It's telling me I misspelled transform, so I'm gonna make sure it was spelled correctly. Perfect. And then you'll notice that each one has a list inside. So each row had this many delimiting codes or non-deployability codes in there. But what we want to do is combine it into one column, so that's what we're going to do. Combine all these lists into one. You notice that the list.transform got out of there, so we're just going to type it back in. All right, so now we have achieved one single column with every single deployability code there was. It's just one list. Before we start, I want to talk about the list.accumulate. So looking here at the syntax, you'll see that list.accumulate, you need a list as a list. We've already created that list, so let's just put that to the side for now. And then it asks for a seed as any, and that is where you want this list.accumulate to begin. That could be the source step, that could be 3 steps into that query. It just all depends where you want to start from. And then you got to give it an accumulator function. Think of the accumulator as a running total. It adds to each new value to the previous total state to get the updated total or current. It's like a snowball getting bigger and bigger as it rolls, with each new value adding to the total. If you take the example on the screen, you'll see that 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is a simple list. Each one of those would add to the next one, and to the next one, and to the next one, until your output would come out with 15. So 1 plus 2 equals 3. That 3 you would add to the next 3, which is 6, at 4, 10 plus 5 is 15. I'm going to open that up. Alright, so list.accumulate. It's asking for a list as a list that we created over here with the ND codes. So we're going to put the ND codes there. Then we're going to give it its starting point, which is the source step in this query. And then we're going to give it an aggregation. An aggregation usually has two parameters, state and current. But we're going to rename those as output and non-dep code. We're going to say equals, and we're going to give it a caret. We want it to add a column with this, and we're again going to put output. If you notice, it gave us our parameter there already because we already listed it as one. And then non-dep code. There we go. And right after that, we're going to say each one. And let's just see what this brings. Okay, so what this did was it gave us all the columns listed out, or all the non-dep codes listed as columns with just ones underneath. Now that we have this, we're going to say we want, well, let's say list that matches any. And for list that matches any, we want it to, again, split the text. So we're going to go text.split. And we want it to separate it by the, first of all, it's looking in the non-employable, non-dep codes column. And then we got to tell it what it's going to split it by, which is our delimiter, which is the semicolon. It's in between those codes. We're going to close parenthesis, and we're going to hit comma right after that parenthesis. I'm going to say each space underscore equals non-dep code. Okay, so we're going to close this out and see what it gives us. So at this point, we have all of our possible non-dep codes at the top. And what these columns are doing is it's telling us whether it's true or false that they exist in the non-dep codes column. So again, it's our accumulator. We laid out two possible parameters here, output and the non-dep code. We're going to add a column, and each in the list that matches anything from the non-dep codes column split by those delimiters, then return the non-dep code. So it's going to tell us whether it lives in there or not. Perfect. At this point, we want to take this one just a little bit further. We want to replace that true and false with the actual code. So then we can unpivot these columns and have a list of all the codes that they do have. So we want to do an if statement here. Each if the list matches any, then give me the non-dep code, right? And then I need non-dep code else, let's just put none. Okay, so what that did was it, instead of give me true or false, it gives me either the non-dep code or the word none. Now that we have those two things, we can unpivot these columns. The way I did that is I clicked on the first code column there, and I hit Control Shift, and I scrolled all the way over to the right. I click there, select. Okay, we're going to click on Pivot Columns. And here, you can tell there's two columns now. One with all the possible non-D codes, and then whether or not it exists for that person. You can see that person is listed out multiple times. We're going to clean that up. The first thing is we got to get rid of the nulls and the nones in these columns, which will just give you a list of who has what code. And then we're going to merge the restrictions lookup table or dimension table with your true or false here. And finally, that'll spit out a roster of everyone and their highest precedent non-deployability reason code. Okay, so here's where you do the merge, and really we're doing this merge between the restrictions and the true and false table to get the precedence. We're doing a left outer join, so all from the first and matching from the second. Alright, so now we've merged them, and we got to expand this table, and what we want is the precedence code, or the precedence number. Alright, so you see there's a bunch of nulls there, and there's a bunch of nones over there. We got to get rid of those two things. So first, we're going to get rid of the none by filtering them out. And then second, I'm going to show you how I group these. I took employee ID name and non-dep codes. I did the min of the precedence, so the lowest number, which is the highest precedence. And then from here, we'll just press OK. Remember here to filter all the nulls from the highest P column. Okay, so our current roster has one issue, and that issue is that there's only 142 personnel here, and in the original readiness roster there was 144. Two people fell off because they didn't have any codes on them. We ended up filtering those people out. So in order to capture everyone, we have to do one thing, which is one final merge between the readiness roster, the original readiness roster, and the true and false roster. So you see here group readiness, true and false. We're going to do one more merge, all from the first, matching from the second. And finally, we have 144 personnel, and we've achieved what we came here to do. We now have a roster of everyone and their highest precedent code, and a column with all of the rest of their codes.
Hey fellow Power BI junkies, thanks for tuning in.